hello. You may be looking at the screen and thinking, I don't recognise this person in front of me, and you're probably right. My name is Steve Mann. I'm relatively recently arrived in the Ipswich Methodist circuit, and I serve the churches in Bramford, in Capel, in Chelmerdiston, in Elmset, and in Holbrook. And today we have the latest, from our Old Testament lectionary reading today, we have the latest in a series of snapshots of the Israelites as they are on that long journey through the wilderness, from liberation in Egypt through eventually to the Promised Land. Who are these people? There are people who are used to being slaves. That's the only life they've ever known in Egypt, day after day after day of toil. They've been brutalized, they've been abused, they've been treated as nobodies, worthless not in themselves, but only valued for what they can produce, as slaves always are. They've had no control over their destiny, no control over their future, no means really of thinking for themselves. And here they are in the wilderness, being led by Moses, who's being led by God. Previously in the story, the Israelites had arrived at Mount Sinai, where God had given them the Ten Commandments. And we read these words, when the people saw the thunder and lightning, and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke. In actual fact, the Hebrew talks about the people seeing the thunder and hearing the lightning, a kind of sensory overload. And not surprisingly, it says they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die." To put it mildly, they were scared witless in the presence of God. After this encounter, Moses goes up to the top of the mountain where he's hidden by the cloud, and he spends 40 days and 40 nights with God. Ironically, with God talking to him about the construction of the tabernacle. I say ironically in the light of what's to follow. But the tabernacle, that place where God's presence will be dwelling alongside the Israelites wherever they went. But now come back down to the bottom of the mountain, come out of the cloud and back down to the Israelites. And imagine that you're one of those Israelites. You're in the wilderness. It's a dry and inhospitable place. Stony ground stretching out for mile and mile as far as the eye can see. And you're a released slave. You haven't been taught to think for yourself. There's a numbness when it comes to anything like self-determination. And Bear Grylls' videos on how to survive in inhospitable places are a long time in the future. It's Moses who's been calling all the shots. Moses guided by God who has been leading you. And now Moses is gone up the mountain, gone for a week, gone for 2 weeks, gone for 3 weeks, getting a bit panicky now, gone for 4 weeks, for 5 weeks, getting on for 6 weeks, 40 days Moses has been gone. And surely you're thinking, surely he's not going to come back now. What do you do? What do you do? You're all alone and feeling vulnerable in a scary place with a scary God out there. What happens next? Next, we're told, when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make gods for us who shall go before us." In actual fact, the Hebrew word there is Elohim, which can be plural or it can be singular. So it's make a god, make God, make gods. You can translate it in a number of different ways. But come, make gods for us who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. This is what prompts Aaron to make a golden image. We popularly know it as the golden calf, although the Hebrew word can mean a young bull, anything up to 3 years of age. It's meant to be a symbol of power and potency. A God that, if he's on your side, means that you can relax with a degree of confidence. That's what Aaron is trying to communicate to the people. But clearly it's a big mistake. Clearly, as we read on through the story, everything goes to pot after Aaron has made this image of a calf. But what is his mistake? It's very simple to say that maybe it's because he is abandoning the God they've been following up to this point, the God of Moses. Moses has gone, so now let's have a new God or new gods. But is that really the case? Let's read on. When Aaron saw this, and he saw the calf, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord." Clearly, in Aaron's mind, they're still worshipping the Lord, the God who has brought them to this point. It says they rose early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to revel. Years ago, I heard someone explain it like this. Moses is gone, seemingly gone, and the people are panicking. Moses has left Aaron in command of the people, so he has to think quickly. What do I do? How do I steady this ship? And he does what all of us do in life. He draws on his previous lifetime of experience. And where has that experience mostly been lived out? In Egypt, in that life of slavery. And what do they do in Egypt? They represent their gods with animals, a jackal, a falcon, a crocodile, and so on. And so Aaron does the same thing. He seeks to represent the God that they have been following in exactly the way that the Egyptians would do, through the use of an image, in order to give that little bit of assurance, that little bit of confidence back to the people, to steady them. Now, we know, because they've just been given the Ten Commandments, that this is wrong. God says, "You shall not make a graven image of me." It may be wrong, but given where Aaron has come from, it's understandable. He's drawn on his previous experience. And similarly, as Christians, as we seek to walk our walk with God, we're so often drawing down from that previous lifetime of experience. And some of that is very good and very positive. But it isn't always so. Some of those negative things that we have been through, that have touched our lives and changed our lives, can actually have an adverse effect on the way that we approach things. These are words from our New Testament reading, and they are wonderful words. Jesus is saying that everyone is invited to experience the goodness that God has in store for them. Go, he says, go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet. This is a king who's giving a wedding feast. To start with, it's just VIPs that are invited, but they are not bothered for a variety of reasons. So he says to his slaves, his servants, go out and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet. He's talking about God. He's talking about the Christian life. Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. If that invitation strikes you as too good to be true, then you are wrong. In fact, it's too good and too true not to be taken seriously. God's invitation is sent out to everyone, you included. And those invited in are the seemingly good and the seemingly bad. It's not based upon human worthiness, simply that God invites you. And yet, despite that, I so often come across people, including good, solid Christian people, who somehow can't grasp that, can't take it in. And often it's because what they're really doing is drilling down into their previous lifetime of experience. Maybe, like the Israelites, that past contains a history of being brutalized and abused, treated as worthless, treated as a nobody. And we feel somehow that we are too significant for God to take us seriously, even for God to accept us. And then again, there are those who feel guilty, who feel that what they've done in the past has affected their worthiness and that God can't possibly accept them. And believe you me, sometimes the greatest of guilt can be reflected from what we in human terms would say is the slightest of things. If any of that strikes a chord with you, then listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. God's invitation is for everyone, and that includes you. Jesus has died so that your sins might be forgiven. Those things that stand as an obstacle between us and God, they're all gone. Jesus has dealt with them. So stop worrying. Accept the invitation as God hands it out to you. And come and enjoy that feast in all its fullness.